Wow, this is bad. I don't know. This is serious. So as you know, Carolyn and I live off grid. And now we claim to be off grid. Obviously, we still have internet. We have Netflix. We have Amazon Prime. I make money with YouTube. So when I say off grid, I mean we are not hooked up to the electrical lines. Yes, there's electrical lines here. They run through the property. The nice thing about the electrical lines running through the property was when I bought the property was a lot cheaper than what it would have been normally, because I have to keep an easement. The other thing is if something were to happen to me and Carolyn didn't want to live off grid anymore, she could hook up to the electric. Pretty simple. When I built the tiny house, I made it so all she has to do basically is unplug from the inverter and plug it into the electrical power. She could hire an electrician to do it. We have solar panels. We got 1,000 watts. They sit on the ground because in the summertime they stay cooler. You lose voltage when the temperature outside gets above, I think, 75 degrees. There's actually a mathematical equation that you can do on your voltage drop to tell you what the temperature outside is. That's how accurate it is. So I keep them on the ground, try to keep them cooler. I notice that when it's up, they didn't stay as cool. I have one of those laser thermometers. Now our solar panels run a freezer, a tablet, 2 cell phones, and some fans. And so when you start talking about solar panels, this is what you have to do. You need to minimize. You need to identify what electric you really need, because everybody is so dependent on electric that if something were to happen, you'd be in trouble. As you know, we just had this balloon go over us. Now, a lot of people were afraid about this balloon, but one of the things that was speculated is an EMP, electrical magnetic pulse. It sounds very sci-fi. If you ever watched The Matrix, Morpheus would shut down the ship, and when the robots were about ready to attack them, they would hit the EMP and it would shut everything down. But they had to shut their ship down, otherwise the EMP would have knocked out their electric also. Now, I've done a little bit of research into this EMP thing. I do know that it has happened to Canada, not by humans, but by the sun. Years ago, I don't remember when it was, the electric went out in Canada, and apparently a solar flare knocked out their electric grid. So I would say that that is probably the most significant issue, is this solar flare. I think right now we're in a hyperactivity of solar flares. Again, I'm not a scientist and I'm not trying to speculate too much. I'm talking about, are you prepared for this? And I actually think I have the answer for this. But let's get to the end of the video before I discuss being prepared. Now, another thing that can happen, somebody can ignite a large explosive device. I think it's non-nuclear. If I understand it correctly, it's non-nuclear. If the device was 250 miles in the sky, it could knock out a 900-mile radius. It would be pretty significant if it was in the middle of the country, like Missouri. So when this balloon came through Missouri, there was a lot of speculation that's what it was. The problem is it was only 60,000 feet, and I think that's 13 miles or something like that. I Googled it, but I already forgot. I think it was 13 miles up. So it would not have knocked out a very massive area, but it would have knocked things out here in Missouri and Illinois and Kansas, Iowa, Arkansas. So a lot of people were concerned about this. And of course, I get a flood of emails. Somebody sends me a YouTube video, and I appreciate it. I actually learned some stuff from that, which I'm going to include in this video. If I understand it correctly, if you are running something, it would knock it out. Well, what would happen if it knocked out the entire United States? Well, it's my understanding that it would knock out transformers. Now, transformers are like this little box. I don't know if you can see it at the top of the telephone pole there. Transformers transform high amounts of voltage down to lower amounts of voltage. So let's say this line here is carrying 5,000 volts. That transformer reduces that voltage to something your house can use, which is 110, 115, 120. It's my understanding that if we lost all the transformers in the United States, it would take 100 years to build another one. I guess when you build it by hand, it's harder. Again, I don't know for sure. And the reason I try not to scare people too much is a long time ago, I used to read this magazine called Science.com. It was really good. I really enjoyed the articles. But after a while, I began to notice that scientists were trying to outdo each other on what was going to destroy us. Finally, they said it was going to be a gamma radiation pulse. It was going to come out from another universe. I mean, it was kind of crazy what they were talking about, aliens on another universe. But these gamma radiation things are very real. And if one were to hit us, it would completely destroy all life on the planet. And I thought, you know what? I'm not here to read articles to scare the living daylights out of me. I won't know if a gamma radiation pulse is about ready to hit us. So if it completely destroys all life, well, there's not much I can do about it. So why am I reading it? Why am I trying to scare myself? So I stopped reading them. So I try not to do that too much on this channel. But there are a lot of people out there that do watch channels that try to scare you, like science.com tried to scare me. The difference is people come to me for answers. People say, you're the only one I know that can actually survive something like this. So I've looked into it a long time ago, EMPs, and can I survive it? Well, initially, no. But let me explain. My inverter and my charge controller would be wiped out. The solar panels would survive, is my understanding. Charge controller controls the amount of electric that goes into the batteries. It's my understanding the batteries will survive. So when you lose your charge controller, you could overcharge your batteries and burn them up. If you did it that way, just hook them straight from the solar panels into the batteries, you would immediately burn them up. Charge controller also reduces the amount of voltage that's going into the batteries. So over time, as your batteries are charging, the voltage coming in, or the amps I should say, I guess it's the amps, I said it wrong, will reduce. If you keep pumping lots of amps and volts into it, they'll burn up. So charge control is very important to keep your batteries safe. Now the inverter inverts the batteries, the DC electric, 12 volts, into 120 volts or 110 volts AC. So your inverter literally hooks up to the battery. You plug an outlet plug into the inverter, and that sends all the electric I need for the house, AC electric. So that would also get burned up because they're both on. So what they say you have to do to protect these devices, you got to have a Faraday cage. I could build a little small Faraday cage out of copper or a box or something, steel. I don't know exactly what it takes, but on Mythbusters, they always make Faraday cages out of copper. And what that will do is that will completely reduce the wavelengths, radio wavelengths, whatever, into that area. So if I put metal over my windows on my house will now be a Faraday cage because it's a metal siding house. The only reason I get a cell signal in there is because I have 3 very large windows. The tower is just right over here, the cell phone tower. If I put the cell phone right up against the wall so the window can't see it, I lose the signal. Now, if you ever been inside a Morton building, I used to work in a Morton building. We had a cell phone tower, I could see it from the building. It was flashing lights, it was there. You go outside, full signal, go inside, didn't have anything. That's a Faraday cage. Metal buildings will prevent radio wavelengths from going through. Well, I don't want to build a Faraday cage. I don't want to invest the money. But something I do have is backups. And the reason I have backups, I have a backup charge controller and I have a backup inverter. I actually have 2 of each. So 3 total. 1 in use, 2 backups. The reason I have backups is in case, just out of the blue, one of them fails. I can immediately hook up a backup and get back to regular living. This isn't talking, I'm not talking about EMPs, I'm talking about just the inverter's old and it went out. I can hook up another one. I have 3 inverters. I have 1 true sine wave, and then I have 2 of these which are modified sine wave. This one I use only for the well. I have a smaller one. This one's 2,000 watts. I have a smaller one, 1,000 watts. And the reason I have that one is because I just got a true sine wave, so I just disconnected the 1,000 watt modified and hooked it into the true sine wave. Too complicated, don't want to get into that. So if an EMP were to hit, I could simply just switch it out, no big deal, and I'd have electric again. The charge controller, I have 2 extras of these. Now these are definitely, well, just like the inverters, are not as good as the one I have running. The one I have running is called an MPPT, and it's an algorithm. It literally monitors the electric coming in, the electric going out. It adjusts accordingly. It converts volts into amps. So if I have too many amps being produced, it will change the volts into amps. This one is just a standard charge controller. It'll shut it off and turn it on. It doesn't monitor anything, it doesn't change anything. And when I first did solar 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that's the only thing they had was charge controllers like this. The MPPTs are modern technology. So I could still continue on. It wouldn't be as good of a system like I have now. Now, the other thing I would do is something like that were to happen, I'd unplug the freezer and just get rid of it because I wouldn't have the generator anymore. Eventually, we would run out of gas. So I would start canning all the food in the freezer. That would give me enough electric to be able to run the well anytime I wanted, which is always the concern, is if something were to happen, that's HDF, stuff hits the fan, I need to be able to run that well. Well, currently I run it off the generator just because it's nice, it's easier. And I don't have enough electric when I'm running the freezer to consistently be able to run the well. I can't run the well, I have run the well when the sun's high in the sky. Now people will ask me, inevitably, won't your batteries eventually go bad? Kind of, not really. I can repair them, I have repaired them. I haven't done it on video because it's dangerous and I don't want to get anybody hurt, but you can repair batteries. I would like to say I could get the batteries to last the rest of my life. The biggest thing though is I wouldn't be using them as much. That means they would be in a constant state of charge. They would never get below 12.9 volts. Well, I don't mean never, but rarely would they get below 12.9 volts. And they would always get up to 13.7. And if you can do that with your batteries, they will pretty much live indefinitely. So as long as I'm not using them all the time. Now, when I'm running the well, I would still try to run that on a big sunny day at noontime. But now here's the big thing. Would I survive an EMP if a country sent over an EMP, like in the balloon? They did a study back in the early 2000s, the government did. And they said 90% of the people would die eventually from the lack of electricity. 10% of the country would survive. So 30 million people out of 300 million people, 30 million people would survive. Here's the thing. If it was an attack from a different country, that country would immediately invade. The country that we're thinking about has a lot of people. 30 million people against a lot of people. We wouldn't make it. So no, when we talk about survivability and SHTF, I try not to get overwhelmed with it because it's just too much to think about. I do the best I can. I try not to panic. I feel like that I'm pretty self-sustaining, but there's no way I can fight off an army. And I don't think I will. So if you click this up next box, take the video that I made yesterday. So if I can inspire you, so stop worrying. We'll get through it. So you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.